And so with that, I would like to invite GAIN's Chief Digital Officer, Abdul Ibrahim, to join me on stage to share his thoughts.
Thanks, James. So I'm the Chief Digital Officer at GAIN. Some of you may have heard of us, some of you may have heard of some of our legacy brands. So we had Access, Catch, Nomensa, Bunnyfoot. We had actually 13 different agencies. We've been on a journey ourselves of integrating these agencies across a whole marketing ecosystem. So if you think about the marketing funnel, where we have awareness, consideration, conversion, loyalty, we've mapped our capability areas. When we've integrated, I was brought into GAIN about a year and a half ago, and one of my tasks was looking at not only our digital strategy, but part of the integration story. How do we integrate these capabilities into a story that makes sense for the market? And how do we leverage AI and actually develop an AI strategy that makes sense for that market? So thinking about that marketing funnel, we mapped our capability areas. So around driving awareness, we have all performance marketing capabilities in that area. So SEO, paid media, paid social, all of those areas. Then when you hit to consideration in that area, experience, so we have in the front row here, Neil, who's the CEO of our experience division, who are the partners, I think partners of the year last year with Acquia, where it's about building those digital experiences, right? Building that so that people can consider in an effective way, right down to then the next area, which is conversion. So we run the largest specialized conversion rate optimization agency globally, conversion.com, which is our next area around if it's a direct sell in direct to market, it would be a purchase. If it is a B2B buyer, it would be a lead. So we have conversion specialism, and then we have loyalty, which is mapped to our customer science unit, which is all about driving lifetime value, underpinned by a creative studio. Now, when my CEO brought me into GAIN, I came from 25 years background in MarTech. I was client side first. I was in Gartner for a little bit. I was in Oracle Marketing Cloud for about 8 years. He brought me in, and part of my role was to define the AI strategy. What are we going to do differently? Are we just going to be in the narrative which we are seeing a lot in the industry, which is really a race to the bottom, using AI, which I'm sure everybody's doing here today, to drive efficiency and drive costs down? But that's not differentiated. So when I looked at that, I said, actually, we want to be in a race to the top. We don't want to be in a race to the bottom. We want to think about how can AI be a force multiplier? How can it actually help us do things that we could not do before, but with human ingenuity still at the center of that? Because we are a services business fundamentally, but we are shifting to a services plus software business. So we defined a strategy, which is, if back on the slide below, you see we believe the greatest impacts come from human ingenuity, which is combined with creativity, powered by robust data and tools. But that sounds good on a slide, but to make that real, I had to put a whole 15-page paper to go to the board to get investment to actually build software. One of the things that I found interesting when looking outside in, coming into GAIN, was that the clients that GAIN had, and some of the capabilities when I started to scratch under the hood, started to see those things. And when I looked under the hood, what I saw is that, in fact, there was intelligent technology. There was machine learning models, there was AI models being utilized by the teams, but they were only internal facing. They were used for better delivery of service. So what we did is actually made a bet saying that we don't just want to play in the services world. We want to move into building SaaS products. And we are seeing this convergence in the marketplace. Even OpenAI, even Anthropic have invested the other way around. They've actually just purchased some consulting firms. This morning I saw the news, WPP Publicis, the competitor WPP, have acquired LiveRamp for $2 billion, right? So we're seeing this shift from pure services or pure technology to a combination of both. And in GAIN, we're very much going in that journey. So we're taking some of that niche specialist capability that we have within our teams and then building products on top of that. So in the GAIN ecosystem, we've built GAIN IQ. Today you're going to see, and I'm going to talk about one of the first applications that we brought to market called Lupine, which is now integrated into Acquia Source. We've got an MVP working. We'll be rolling that out into a beta. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this is under an ecosystem which is an intelligence platform, because I didn't want to build just one application in a niche area. I want to build a suite of applications, taking the IP, which has been hard-earned within our teams. So when I talk to Neil's team, we've been running accessibility audits for 20 years. We have some of the best talent in accessibility. We have the head of accessibility, the ex-head for the BBC. We have so much talent. When I'm thinking about that, I'm like, I can turn that into a SaaS product, right? An accessibility co-pilot. That's something on my roadmap for future. When I started to think about our conversion unit and seeing that the specialism and the AI models that they have built, or machine learning model, we translated and built Lupine on top of that. And then in our performance marketing unit, we see we're one of the world's leading performance creative specialists. So we've built a product called Spiria, which will be coming to market in a couple of months. So when we're building a platform, I'm looking to build reusable components that can be leveraged across the board. So the first product we're bringing to market is called Lupine. Now, people ask about the name. It comes from Floria. We are underpinned by a creative studio, as I mentioned, right? So you see a lot of the imagery. We have, their brand experts look at this and say, if we want a scalable ecosystem, and Plants and Floria, you can choose n number of names. And so therefore, Lupine was one of those which was born out of our conversion unit. And essentially what Lupine is about, you don't need any script. You simply plug in a URL, any URL which is publicly readable. And Lupine, it analyzes that. It leverages a framework, which is actually a trademark framework from our conversion unit, which is called the Levers framework. We've got a whole white paper on that you can read, which really looks at, so it takes a URL. We ran a demo last week for one of the biggest fast food retailers in the world, competitor to McDonald's. I can't mention who, but we ran that. When we ran their website, it ingests, or it scrapes the website, and you'll see a little bit of a demo in a moment. It scrapes the website, it ingests all the components, identifies the problems, because it's using the Levers framework, which our conversion unit's been using for about 17 years. And then it's using a data set, right? And one of the biggest questions when I talk to all the vendors in the ecosystem out there, one of the biggest questions they ask me is, isn't this just a GPT wrapper? Isn't this the Claude wrapper? No, the answer is no. In fact, we have a data set of 10,000 plus experiments, which we've got a machine learning model on top of, which gives us a confidence score of how likely, when we identify a problem on a site from a conversion point of view, from a CRO, conversion rate optimization lens, how likely our suggestion and recommendation and experiment to run is to convert, right? So it's actually, Lupine is based upon that technology and that model, and it's using in the background a number of agents. So it's built in the agentic ecosystem. The website is now live as of last week. We went GA with our standalone product. It's a SaaS product. If you go to iq.thisisgain.com, you can go and you can test it for free. It's out there. But what is an interesting thing is our relationship with the technology vendors like Acquia, our partners, that we are building integrations, and you're going to see that in a moment, which is very interesting. It opens up a different dimension. So Lupine essentially analyzes websites, identifies the problems, identifies hypotheses for improvements, incremental improvements on the site that would lead to better conversion. To make it real,
Check this out. This is Lupine. It tells people who rely on their websites to grow what they should optimize, why, and how. The learnings from 10,000 experiments across 15 years, proven frameworks, and the methodologies of best-in-class consultants went into this. And it handles the heavy lifting of conversion rate optimization and promotes people into decision makers and strategists. So let's take a look at one of the ideas after analyzing this page. Lupine recommended normalize salience in category tiles. Test a category tile presentation where no single tile visually overwhelms its peers, looking at this clearance option, bright yellow. But the truth is, ideas are cheap. And what makes them valuable is their defensibility and the reasoning behind them. And especially where AI is concerned, the verifiability of both of those. And that's what Lupine provides. Lupine starts by scraping the page and grabbing each of the elements and the components so it understands what the makeup is. And then it begins making observations the same way a human would. And these are more design focused, spacing focused, and it begins to find patterns. And it clusters them under a negative friction perspective and surfaces them as opportunities. And these are the problems, such as visual priority feels inconsistent. There are a lot of things to look at with bright colors, yellow and blue. Then it goes to the root causes, the why, the hypotheses, the what ifs, and then the experiments, which take the hypotheses to execution and give the actual idea and change that's proposed. And there's a prioritization score as well for each of these ideas based in an ML model that predicts with a 65% chance what's likely to win based on which levers were surfaced, like usability. There's evidence, best practices shown. We even show what the variant should be, what the execution is. And that is whether it's styling intent, the responsiveness rules, what it should look like on mobile versus desktop. Here's what an analysis looks like overall. You can see the flow of reasoning and the logic that goes from problem, visual priority feels inconsistent, to root causes, salience items compete with each other. The hypotheses, maybe a more predictable scan path will improve the progression. I mean, look at this page. And the experiment, normalize the salience in the category tiles, and then the variance. And not only do we provide the text for the variance, but you can see the before and the after. And you can visualize that. Here's the before and here's the after for this one. Here's the original, the status quo, with the bright yellow button that's taking everyone's attention. And here's the after, the before and the after. What Lupine is effectively working towards is an end-to-end solution that can handle CRO. And it helps people where analysts previously have to spend hours digging, looking through the site and trying to understand where the opportunities are. It helps get them that first step, helps surface these opportunities. They can begin iterating and optimizing faster and operationalizing it by being able to share it with the rest of their team and visualize it so they can share, hey, this is what it actually looks like. That's Lupine.
So that's Drake, my product owner for Lupine, and he just showed a whirlwind tour of the product there, right? So looking at, analyzing the components, identifying problems, identifying hypotheses from a conversion point of view, recommending experiments, and then actually visualizing those experiments. Now, what is very exciting for us, and this is what we've been working with James and team on, is an integration, our first step integration to the Acquia ecosystem, starting with Acquia Source. So you're going to see here, one of the engineers from Acquia took our API documentation. This is Acquia Source. So you have, it's a website. As an example here, you have a modal or a widget running, which will then pull via API. You see Lupine CRO. Via API, it's looking at that site and then pulling all of those components into Acquia Source. So it's quite exciting. In the CRO ecosystem, we've already started to do that with other vendors. This is now our first movement into the CMS ecosystem. So it analyzed this particular website, it's identified all the different, either it's from a UX usability point of view or comprehension or trust, right? There are different factors it's looking at. And that score you see, so 8.1 is driven by our ML model predicting that 8 out of 10, a likelihood of a conversion. So it's sort of directing the user that these are areas that you should work on. And the next step, which we are working on together with the team, is then you can actually activate that experiment, right? So, and there's two ways of activating an experiment. What we're seeing, because I went through the traditional cycle of alpha testing, closed beta, open beta, so we have a lot of clients utilizing already. And what we started to see in terms of the feedback from our clients was that some of them, only a portion of them, want to experiment, the higher volume sites. They want to run an experiment, so they want to push that into a VWO. So we're working with our friends at VWO to look at how to push that into their ecosystem as an example, right? But there are others who just want to directly activate the change on the CMS level, right? So they want to activate that directly within Acquia Source, and therefore we're working with the team. Next step, there'll be a button, you click, and then an agent will run on the Acquia side to dev that experiment. So as a summary before I end, right? So these are some of the component features of Lupine. So it's a lever-based diagnostic, a variant, gen, and export if it's a standalone, but integrated with Acquia, then you don't necessarily need the export. You can click a button, the agent will code the experiment for you. And we're adding business context that's coming soon, and then we're going to have a backlog of all of those experiments that you're running, right? So there's different features in the product set. But this is really an exciting moment for us, right? This is an exciting moment of integrating directly into Acquia Source. So the future is exciting. Thank you to the team.